They have always underestimated you. Perhaps they assumed you were simply another face in the throng, someone who would miss the patterns, shifts, and changes in the air before others could experience them. But you did. You saw through the illusions to the flaws in the foundation. Long before they were undeniable, it wasn't just a sensation. It was certainty, the type of knowledge that does not need evidence, the sort that puts you ahead of everyone else while they're still catching up. They labeled it paranoia. They termed it overthinking. They said you were hallucinating things. But time is your witness, because they all vowed it would never happen. Everything is going just as you expected, and now they're scurrying, attempting to make sense of what you saw coming. It was never about luck. It was never about chance. This was about you, your vision, your intuition, your connection to something beyond their comprehension. And this is what shocks them to the core. They had never dreaded what you knew. They feared who you are. You were never simply another piece in their game. You were an oddity, the one who does not just follow the script. You rework it. And now, as everything collapses around them, they know the truth. Too late. You were never intended to fit in. You were designed to stand out. The warnings were present. They pushed ahead, unshaken. They are convinced of their own infallibility. There is no need to persuade. There's no need to dispute. Just the truth, raw. Then it seemed as if the air itself moved. The sequence started. It was not immediate at first. The cracks were slight, easy to ignore. But gradually, doubt crept into their tones. Stolen looks revealed their skepticism, and the earth underneath them began to move. The same people who had previously ignored every warning remark. Now they were groping for answers, clutching for certainties that no longer existed. As their grasp on the illusion they had created faded, desperation took the place of arrogance. Now they see it. Undeniable. Inevitable. The burden of knowledge weighs heavy in the quiet they refuse to recognize. Now the knowledge sinks in. Slow and stifling dread and denial interweave in a struggle between their pride and the truth. They can no longer disregard what was previously rejected as supposition. Now it is a fact. The echoes of their own incredulity loom over them, lingering in discussions that they cannot forget. Words said with conviction have changed to sorrow. They repeat such events, looking for a getaway, an alternate explanation, anything to make it all mean something different. But, deep down, the recognition exists. The realization that this was never a chance. This was not luck. This wasn't a coincidence. And it scares them more than anything. Every warning, every truth is recorded in time, disregarded, only to be rediscovered. Too late, dismissed as noise, ignored as meaningless, until reality crashed down, undeniable and inescapable. Now there is no space for doubt. The events that were so readily dismissed have occurred precisely as predicted. The treachery, the unraveling, and the impending collapse. It's all there. Undeniable. Irreversible. They skimmed through the traces of their confidence. They were looking for an escape from what they had sworn would never happen. However, the past does not bend. It does not yield. It serves as a memorial to every misplaced word, every misguided belief. And that realization, the inevitable finality of reality, is what bothers them right now. However, if it comes from God, you will be unable to stop these guys. You'll just find yourself struggling against God. Acts of fortress constructed on falsehoods may only last so long. At first glance, it seems powerful, unshakable, towering, and tall, as if it was designed to survive forever. But here's the problem with fake foundations. They break beneath the weight of reality. And then the truth begins to creep in. When reality starts to show through, no amount of patching will keep the building together. They believed they were untouchable. They believed they could alter history, control the narrative, erase everything they had done. But allow me to tell you something. You can't escape the truth. And you certainly can't outrun God. At one point, their voices were brimming with confidence. They talked with assurance, mocking, laughing. They twisted the facts to suit their version of the narrative. They ignored every warning, indicator, and opportunity to change their path, because they believed they had complete control. But control is an illusion, and now they see it sliding through their fingers like sand. And now they are scrambling. They now stammer. They were once so confident and daring. They were so loud in their charges and dismissals. They've become quiet. Because assurance comes easily when there are no repercussions. Confidence is easy when there is no responsibility. But once the fractures begin to appear, once the truth emerges, the loudest shouts fade into murmurs. They rework their words, change their viewpoint, and adjust their tale just enough to make it seem as if they were never wrong. However, you cannot change the past. This is not a tale that can be edited in real time. They uttered these things, the acts they took, the method they maintained their lie. Everything is now written in stone. People remember the worst aspect. Because deceit is only effective when people are prepared to forget. They counted on it. They expected people to lose interest. Moving on, letting go. But there are too many eyewitnesses. Too many people witnessed it occur in real time. Too many people heard their statements. I saw their deeds, and are not readily deceived by a quick shift in tone. See, they believed they had the power. But power is based on falsehoods, is borrowed time, and the debt has been due. They assumed they were in control of the pieces. However, the game has swung against them, and now they are being cornered. And you? You don't even need to do anything. You do not have to reveal them. You do not need to struggle to prove yourself. You are under no obligation to correct the record, because the truth does it for you. And nothing is more terrible for them. They realize they have no control over what will happen next. Because when the illusion crumbles, the smoke clears, and the dust settles, nothing remains standing. But this is the reality, and they will have no option but to sit in the debris of their own creation. So they attempt to modify the script. They were not mistaken. Not really. They merely had reservations. They never disregarded anything outright, only questioned it. They were not against you, only neutral observers. But no matter how well they try to weave this new narrative, the reality remains. They were not passive onlookers. They were unrelenting in their denial and scorn. And now, as they attempt to rebuild their previous posture, they are unable to escape the weight of their own history. There are too many eyes observing them. The evidence is too apparent, and the truth is too harsh to ignore. There is no space for evasion anymore. It is way too late for that, and the recollections of their own assurance have been proved wrong. We will follow them long after the dust has settled. They place the plan into action. I am certain that you will break under the weight of their lies. A network of murmurs, well-placed distortions, and intentional misdirection. All of this is intended to trap you in the exact disaster they engineered. But illusions have a knack of turning on their makers, and before long, the very web they'd constructed started to unravel from inside the power they believed they controlled. The tail slid through their fingers, their hold on control undermined by their own mistakes. The same voices that formerly spoke their falsehoods began to waver. The same allies they had relied on began to doubt their plans for you. It went inside and consumed them instead. You've never had to battle for your truth. It held steady on its own while they tried to escape the conflagration they had created. When the storm has passed, the wicked are gone, but the virtuous hold strong forever. The Proverbs. A home constructed on sand may last for a season, but when the storm hits, when the winds howl and the seas surge, that home crashes into ruins. And that is precisely what is occurring right now. They imagined they were the story's architects, creating a beautiful illusion that no one could see through. However, illusions do not have weight. And now, beneath the weight of the truth, their whole foundation is crumbling. They were certain they had control. They were confident they had created the ultimate hoax. But allow me to tell you something. God doesn't bless. There's no mess. They believed they were the ones pulling the strings. The masterminds are the hidden hands who shaped the story to their favor. But they neglected one thing. You cannot outwit divine order. You can't change reality forever. You cannot hide the truth, when the truth was never theirs to keep in the first place. Lies. They have an expiry date. They may thrive for a time. They may even persuade the gullible for a while. But, in the end, every deceit must face the consequences. And the fire is here. They now stand among the wreckage of what they created, watching helplessly as they attempted to dominate the planet. Slipped straight past their fingertips. Those who previously believed them. They walked away. They used to rely on their buddies. Gone. Vanished. Like smoke in the breeze. and it is what is eating them alive. Because what they sought the most was not power or influence. It was validation. They needed people to believe in their narrative. They crafted. They wanted their words to be meaningful, their falsehoods to take root. However, the land was never fruitful. And now, every lie they spread has faded, leaving just dust behind. They attempted to replicate something that was not intended for them. They imitated. They emulated. They observed your every step. I'm certain that if they could only take your essence, they might recreate the power that defines you. However, imitation is a cheap counterfeit. You cannot steal anointing. You cannot create heavenly favor. And the more they attempted to conform to what they believed you were, the more they lost sight of themselves. They are now hollow. Now, they've gotten lost. The mask has slipped. The disguise has gone. And all that remains is a brittle shell of who they once were. They believed they could take shortcuts to greatness. They believed they could maneuver their way into something holy. But they didn't realize that what is genuinely decreed cannot be duplicated, stolen, or touched. And so they remain broken, exposed, desperate to return to the illusion they previously ruled. But the illusion has gone. The truth is standing tall. And you're still here, still climbing, still walking with purpose, while they fall under the weight of their own lie. Because when the storm arrives, when the floodwaters surge, when the winds shiver, everything that was never supposed to stand, only what is genuine survives. And you were never the one who needed to worry. It began with curiosity, a fleeting preoccupation. However, as they watched, they became more disoriented. The transition began slowly. They are gradually losing touch with their true selves. They borrowed, imitated, absorbed. I'm certain that if they could reproduce your presence, they may claim the authority behind it. However, stolen flames never burn the same. What they believed was mastery turned into erosion, a gradual destruction of what they ever were. And now they're left with bits of an identity they don't recognize. They attempted to shape themselves into something they were not intended to be. And by doing so, they cut links with the same basis that formerly gave them meaning. But you never wandered while others pursued a mirage. You strode ahead, unconcerned, untouched. And now, standing amid the ruins of their own demise, they realized too late. This route was never intended for them. They used every strategy, whispered phrase, and planned action to break you. The games were complicated, the traps were precisely planned, and the betrayals were strategically put. They were so certain that they could control the result and that their approach would defeat you. But nothing worked. The destruction they anticipated never materialized. The unwinding they expected never occurred. And now they're left with nothing but their own disintegration. They can't understand it. How? Nothing they did was sufficient. How every effort to change your destiny failed before it could take effect. The despair has evolved into terror. Their confidence led to restless nights. Because now, every action they make comes back to them. They are confronted with the reality they had never contemplated. They were never in charge. And now comes the retribution. The moment they'd been dreading for so long has finally come. There is no escaping the weight of what they have put in motion. For they have sown the wind, and they will reap the whirlwind. Isaiah 8:7. They believed they could sow deception and reap success. They felt they could create traps, yet never fall into them. However, the Lord is not mocked. What a man sows, he will likewise reap. They created their dominion by deceit. Their home rests on shifting sand. And now the water has arrived. The tempest they unleashed to eat you has turned. And now it pursues them with wrath. They were so certain. They had absolute authority. They were persuaded that they had outmaneuvered every possible consequence. But they neglected one thing. You cannot play chess with the Almighty and expect to win. They were the architects of their own demise. Every action is meant to pull you down. They plotted in secrecy, whispering in the darkness. They crafted tales with such perfection that even they began to believe the falsehoods. They called it strategy. They called it wisdom. But allow me to tell you something. There is no knowledge, insight, or advice that can oppose the Lord. Their schemes were destroyed, and their illusions revealed. They excavated a very deep trench, and suddenly the earth underneath them has fallen, and they are sliding into the same darkness they had planned for you. Oh, they believed they were untouchable. They marched confidently, oozing with arrogance. They moved about the world as if they had already won. They surround themselves with enablers. People who nourish their pride strengthened their delusions. I whispered beautiful affirmations into their ears. Nobody will ever find out. Nobody will ever stop you. However, the voices have gone quiet. Those who previously encouraged them are turning away. And now they're looking about for aid and rescue. For even one extended hand. There's nothing. There are no safety nets or escape routes. The door is closed, and there is no way out. Because this is something they never understood. You can't curse what God has blessed. You cannot stop what heaven has planned for you, the one they attempted to shatter. They planned against him and declared he would never ascend. You're still here, not just standing, but flourishing, not only surviving, but growing. See, they felt they were fighting against you. However, they were not battling with flesh and blood. They were battling against a mission, a calling, or a divine mandate. And that was a struggle they would never win. They really wanted you down. They chucked everything they owned. Every weapon, every rumor, every underhanded treachery. They spent so much time attempting to dominate the narrative, to mold it in their favor, and to bury the truth so deeply that no one would ever discover it. But let me tell you something about the reality. It does not need defense. It does not need an army. It does not need to battle for recognition because, when the time comes, truth will stand on its own. When it happens, every falsehood crumbles like a house of cards. And that is precisely what is occurring right now. They caused the storm, and now they're stuck in it. They were the ones who used their hands to do damage. And now, devastation is consuming all they constructed. And you don't even need to raise a finger. You don't need to seek vengeance. You do not have to prove anything. All you need to do is keep marching, rising, and pushing ahead. Because the war is already won. You were picked for something more. You were never intended to fit in. Never intended to be controlled. I never intended to follow their ideas. And now, as they sit amid the ashes of their presumed success, they finally comprehend. They never had influence over you. They never had a chance. They were never the ones that stirred the pot. They were never the ones who led the charge. They simply stood there, watching, observing, and letting things unfold. It was not their struggle after all. They separated themselves, believing that silence rendered them impartial. But neutrality is an option. In the absence of action, complicity emerged. They ignored the warnings, shrugged aside the indications, and scoffed at the thought that things might go this way. However, now that the dust has settled and the truth is apparent, they are wrestling with the weight of their own inactivity. They replay discussions in their heads, remembering the times they could have acknowledged, the realities they could have recognized, and the clarity they lacked before. Is cutting now the understanding that the warning indicators were there all along? They merely choose not to notice them. And the worst part? You never needed affirmation. You knew far before others did. And that knowledge bothers them in ways they won't admit. They will not confess it, won't express the sorrow that remains under the surface. But it's there, in the reluctance. They dodge your eyes, in the silence, recognizing that the truth was always in reach. They weren't prepared to face it. They claimed to be indifferent. They were certain that the past was behind them. However, their gaze never wanders for long. Every update, every little movement is monitored in quiet, hiding under veils of anonymity, looking for proof that their efforts were not in vain. They rationalize it as mere curiosity, just a brief glimpse. But the reality is sharper. They are anxious to know, were their strategies successful? Did the fissures they attempted to cut really form? Did their planned pandemonium create a lasting impression? And the understanding that nothing had unraveled, but rather split. Burns were a greater loss than they had expected. Worse, they see success unfold. Their influence leaves me unaffected. They made no impression on me, and it alone becomes the thing from which they cannot escape. What began as a hunt for confirmation has evolved into something else completely. They can't get rid of their infatuation, and they won't admit it. They scrutinize every action not to glorify failure, but to understand resiliency. What was once an intention to destroy has morphed into a quest for understanding. But the quiet and reluctance to interact, the lack of responsiveness, it devastates them more than any confrontation ever could. Because, in the end, Losing isn't what they dread most. It's understanding they were never important in the first place. They meticulously crafted their tale. Block by block, details were interwoven so perfectly that even they started to believe the fiction. For a time, it worked. Every phrase, every distortion was precisely put till the fissures revealed. Not immediately, not at a single instant, but in steady and evident changes. Conversations that had previously flowed effortlessly turned reluctant. Glances, previously full with conviction, are now tinged with uncertainty. Those who formerly provided steadfast support have become distant and reluctant. They are no longer ready to defend what they once accepted without question. The unraveling isn't loud or abrupt. It is sluggish, agonizing, impossible to control. They can sense it in the changing eyes, the imperceptible pauses before answers, and the energy that previously favored them but now repels. They strive to stop it, to fix what is slipping through their fingers, to remind folks of the version they so painstakingly created. However, there is no regaining control. When the weight of truth pounds in from all sides, the more they attempt to distort, the more the strands unravel. And the one thing they never anticipated, the one thing they never thought imaginable, has come true. They've lost control of the tale. And the worst part? They understand there is nothing they can do to stop it. The Lord will fight for you. You merely need to remain motionless. The Exodus. They assumed they could manage the war. They believed that their words, machinations, and frantic efforts to entice you into their mess would unsettle you. But allow me to tell you something. Your reluctance to play was the most powerful move you have ever made. They set the scene. They constructed the story. They waited for you to turn up, defend yourself, and prove them wrong, to fall into their trap. But you stood still. You let them speak. You let them toss the stones. You allowed them to waste their breath. And it's driving them crazy, because this is what they do not grasp. Silence is not the same as surrender. Silence is a strategy. Silence equals power. And when you walk in heavenly favor, you don't have to investigate every rumor. You do not need to explain yourself to individuals who are determined to misunderstand you from the outset. You don't have to fight conflicts that were won before they ever started. So now they're waiting. They wait for an indication that they have reached you. Their remarks had a lasting impact, that their efforts to break you were not in vain. However, there is no response. There is no evidence of struggle. There is no confirmation that their arrows struck their intended target. That's right there. That's what is destroying them. Because the minute they discovered they couldn't shake you, they lost all of their power. They attempted to control the narrative, but the weight of their own deception is now crushing down on them. They are suffocating beneath the rumors that they propagate. They weave webs. They are entangled in their own falsehoods. They believe they were laying a trap for you. Instead, they walked straight into one of their own creations. And they gaze about, seeking for the recognition on which they formerly thrived. They perceive only the nothingness of their own fabrication. See, they wanted a conflict. They wanted to see your struggle, to see you respond and make you doubt yourself. But they never comprehended that the most powerful warriors don't necessarily battle with swords. They fight with discipline. They battle with faith. They fight without fighting at all. Because heaven has already responded, you do not need to. You don't need to explain yourself. When the truth is already working to your advantage. And you don't have to interact with individuals who were never supposed to have access to your spirit in the first place. So let them watch. Allow them to refresh their pages. Let them wait in the shadows. Allow them to whisper among themselves. You owe them nothing. No word, no explanation. Not even a look in their way. Because, while they worry about what you're doing, you're too focused on winning to notice them. And that's what really wrecks them. Something has changed, and they can feel it in the air. The consequences of their own decisions weigh heavily on them in unexpected ways. There was no conflict. There is no last fight. Just the creeping awareness that they had lost before they even began. They believed they had control. They thought they could control the result. But you went on while they remained stuck in the devastation they caused. Their once steadfast confidence has weakened. Their remarks were guarded. Their presence faded. Every action has brought them here, and it cannot be reversed. What seemed like an unending loop of manipulation has finally come to an end. Not because they gave up, but because they were left behind. They no longer have access to you, no longer wield influence, no longer have a place in your universe. And that was the unanticipated effect. While others are forced to dwell in the aftermath of their actions, you rise unscathed, unconcerned, and untouchable. This is the current reality, and it cannot be changed. They are nothing but a lesson in self-destruction. Proof that the truth always prevails while falsehood fails. And what remains of their impact? Nothing except a faded recollection.